Okay, I wanted to answer some questions that I've received this week so far for week one Foundations of Growth. So here are some questions and answers that will hopefully provide a little bit more context about what we've covered. The first question: how do I determine how much time to allocate on growth? Okay, so part of this answer depends on the size of your team, who all is working on what, and the other piece is what stage you're at in terms of how you're doing with customer acquisition and getting people to use your product. Is it just you and maybe one other person at your startup, or do you have a full team? The other thing is stage. So if you're high velocity, high churn, so meaning you've got a steady flow of users coming in, but they're churning or they're not really becoming customers, then you need to figure out why. And in this case, it's likely that you may need to spend most of your time focused on doing things that keep those users sticking around. Okay, so you really got to focus on those core activities that you want those users to take and getting those users to become customers. So, kind of in the activation space. If you've got a steady flow of users coming in and they're sticking around, well, where do you go to find more of those users? So start thinking about those channels that might be a fit where you can go and start to look at scaling, right? So this is still probably early days. It's not going to be all of the channels. You're probably not going to spend a ton of money, but there's likely other places where you can find users like the ones that are coming in right now and just find more of them. Now, if you've got low velocity, which means you've got very few users coming in, it's a trickle of users, or maybe you're a B2B platform that's really expensive and it just takes a lot of time to onboard somebody or to get them kind of through that purchase window, then you need to be spending almost all of your time on acquisition. Because if you don't ever get people into your product, then the product doesn't really have that much value. So this can be very, very hand to hand. This means that you're going to do very manual things at the start. So a couple examples. You may need to post articles and thought leadership on LinkedIn and tag anybody that you know in the network who might be able to help you add distribution. Or you may need to manually reach out to friends, people you used to work with, ask them who they know that you can talk to, and get people on the phone for customer discovery calls. And do as many of these as you can get. You can even incentivize the process if you need to. So for example, I'll give you a $10 Amazon gift card for a chat. Now that's only really going to work for a role that's a potential fit for your product. But don't be afraid to use that, especially in the early days. You really just need to get that signal. And talking to people is a great way to figure that out. If you have a team and maybe you've got a few people working on some of this stuff already, now might be the time to put somebody in that growth ownership role. And maybe they'll spend 50% of their time on growth, maybe 25%, maybe 50%, maybe even more. Or you may be in a spot where just everybody's totally slammed and they're working on high value stuff, and you need to go out and now hire somebody to help run growth and have them really own those metrics and drive growth across the board. Okay, so really it depends on what your team looks like and kind of where you're at. Next question. I haven't hit scale with my customers yet. What's too small to test? So the basis of this question was around that lower velocity model where you just don't have a ton of people coming in yet. And it's hard to know how you're going to actually run experiments or do different things to kind of move the needle to get more customers to partake in what you want them to do. So if you have so few customers or users coming in that it's going to take weeks or months to get any kind of signal in terms of what you should be doing, you still have a few options. Number one, take big swings. Number two, interview as many customers as you can. 3, spend some money. And 4, use a tool like Full Story or Hotjar. So we're going to look at each of these quickly. The first one is taking big swings. So if you have users coming in and they're not doing what you want them to do, make big radical changes to your product or to your onboarding or to your landing page based on your gut feel until those users do what you intend for them to do. And you'll want to measure these types of big swing changes on a bi-weekly or on a monthly basis. Again, you need more time because you have low velocity. So you need time to get that signal and to start to build this model. If you had a landing page before, for example, that converted 10% of people, try something radically different for a few weeks and see if you can beat that. Right? So that 10% becomes your control. See if you can run an experiment with a radically different page and go higher than that 10%. And in this model, you're going to go for low-hanging fruit. So don't waste time on little incremental updates because it will take you forever to figure out how to scale this if you go that route. So take on some risk. Number 2, interview as many customers as you can. So try to understand what motivated those initial users to use their product. What pain is it solving? Where do they think other people like them are hanging out? Right? Those are all things you can ask in an interview. Then go and find more users in those areas. Number 3, spend some money. So it sounds counterintuitive, but spending money in paid is actually a great, fast way to find if there's a signal. You just may burn your money quickly. So this is not going to be perfect. It's meant to be a gauge to see if anybody actually cares about what you're doing enough to either click or show some kind of interest. So you're going for reach and then you're going for clicks. You can also use tools is the 4th thing. So use a tool like Full Story or Hotjar to track what users are doing on your pages and within your product and really get that data. These tools that you watch every interaction that users have with your product, and it's going to give you a sense of that success or failure. It'll even give you things like rage clicks and other things that people are doing that you may or may not be aware of in terms of what they're doing on your site or in their product, in your product. Okay, the next question. How do I know what customer feedback to listen to and what to ignore? I love this question. The good news is that it means people care, and that's the first step to scaling any startup. And I know this sounds cliche, but a lot of what you're going to hear from customers is just wrong. And that is true especially for your early adopters. They're outliers and outlaws. They love new stuff, or maybe they even know you personally. Maybe they want to be part of something new. These are not what your users down the line are probably going to look like as you scale. These are early adopters. They're called that for a reason. The folks hanging out all day on Product Hunt are probably not your long-term viable users. Collect all the data you can. So my general advice here is to listen to any and all feedback and get as much as you can reasonably collect. But know what they say, and those folks that are yelling and screaming at you, they may not have the best interest of your company in mind over the long term. And they certainly don't know your model like you do. But there are 2 elements to feedback. Qualitative, which is talking to customers. I urge you to have open-ended interviews. Don't go in with a big agenda because you're basically going to hear back what you're asking. You'll bring your own bias into the mix. And watching user behavior is another example of this. And on the quantitative side, this is the data that you have on usage patterns or from something like an NPS survey, right? So you can use both of those. Qualitative data becomes potential experiment or feature ideas. And I like to take all customer inputs and actually drop them into a spreadsheet that's categorized and organized. And you basically sort that on weight based on how often more than one customer asks for the same thing. In the early days, and if you've got a small team, what you're going to look for here is that customers are asking for the same thing over and over again. And if you build that thing, it's going to solve some pain point that they're willing to pay for, right? You want to hear that from multiple people, ideally the majority. And then quantitative, this data actually gives you actual signal and noise. So that plus your quantitative and your qualitative, if you take all that and put that into a framework like RICE or my ICE framework, which we'll get into in the next module, you can measure basically the reach you'll get from these ideas against the efforts you need to put against them. And then you rank those on lowest effort first and highest return first at the top, and then you work your way through that list, and you end up with a really nice set of things that you should work on basically in the right order. So that is it for the initial Q&A. I hope you found that helpful. Just ping me if you've got any questions at all. Thanks.